The Solaris 9 spaceport shimmered with an iridescent glow as Kane Harrow stepped off the transport vessel. Purple-tinged sky stretched above him, dotted with 3 moons in various stages of waxing and waning. He adjusted his tool belt with a practiced flick and scanned the bustling terminal with weary eyes. Another planet, another repair job, another day of his solitary existence. "Welcome to Solaris 9, traveler," chirped a floating drone, its hemispheric body spinning in what Kane assumed was supposed to be a friendly gesture. "Please proceed to customs for biological scanning and intent verification." Kane groaned inwardly. The bureaucracy of interplanetary travel was becoming increasingly tedious. Ever since the Galactic Federation had implemented stricter migration protocols, even short-term contractors like himself were subjected to exhaustive questioning and scanning. "Just here for 3 cycles," Kane muttered, following the stream of disembarking passengers toward a line of robotic customs officers. "Fix the satellite relay station, collect my credits, and I'm gone." The nearest customs robot, a humanoid chassis with an oversized scanner for a head, beckoned him forward with a metallic finger. "Species identification, please." "Human. Earthborn. Currently transient status." Kane handed over his universal ID chip, already mentally calculating the fastest route to his accommodation. He'd learned over years of intergalactic travel that efficiency was key to maintaining his freedom. Get in, do the job, get out. No atachentas, no complicações, no routes. Purpose of visit? The robot's scanner head whirred as it processed Kane's documentation. Contracted technician. "I'm fixing the Northern Hemisphere relay station." Kane pointed to his credentials, which displayed his engineering certifications and current contract details. The customs robot seemed satisfied, its scanner glowing a soft green. "Proceed to biometric." "MOM. Look, my dad is here." The high-pitched shriek cut through the general hum of the spaceport. Kane instinctively turned toward the sound, as did most of the other travelers. A small figure with lavender skin and pointed ears was bouncing excitedly near the reception area, one arm extended, finger pointing directly at Kane. "My dad. It's him. I told you he'd come." Kane blinked in confusion. The child, a girl, he presumed, though with alien species, it wasn't always obvious. Couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 standard Earth years. Her eyes were a striking violet, nearly luminous against her soft purple skin. 2 antenna-like appendages protruded from her forehead, quivering with apparent excitement. "I believe there has been a mistake," Kane said to the customs robot, but it was already extending its scanner toward the commotion. A taller figure hurried after the child, gently taking her hand. The woman, presumably the mother, had similar lavender skin, though her antennae were longer and more elegantly curved. She wore an expression that flitted between embarrassment and concern. "Leary, honey, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice soft but clear enough for Kane to hear. "It's him, Mom." The girl, Leary, was nearly vibrating with enthusiasm. "Just like in my dreams." The human with the tool belt and the star-shaped scar on his hand. She pointed at Kane's right hand, where indeed a small stellate scar marked his skin from an accident years ago with a plasma cutter. Kane felt the blood drain from his face. How could this child possibly know about his scar? The customs robot, seemingly intrigued by this turn of events, extended its scanner toward Kane, then toward Leary, then back again. "Interesting," it intoned in its mechanical voice. "I'm detecting a 43% genetic resonance pattern." "That's impossible," Kane protested, pulling his hand away from the scanner. "I've never been to this planet before. I don't have any children." "Certainly not." "Not." He gestured vaguely toward Leary, who was now beaming at him with unfiltered joy. The woman approached cautiously, her eyes, a deeper shade of purple than her daughter's, studying Kane with intensity. "I'm Anea," she said, "and this is Leary. I apologize for the disruption, but..." She hesitated, looking down at the girl who was still clutching her hand while staring adoringly at Kane. "This is rather unprecedented." "Look," Kane said, trying to regain control of the situation. There's clearly been some misunderstanding. I'm just a technician here on a job. I'll be gone in 3 cycles. I'm not anybody's father. The customs robot, however, was not so easily dismissed. Its scanner was now performing some kind of in-depth analysis that Kane had never seen before. Interspecies genetic compatibility detected. Further verification required. Please proceed to the Intergalactic Bureau of Paternal Affairs Office, located in Terminal C, Section 7. The what now? Kane sputtered. The IBPA, Anea explained, her voice carrying a hint of resignation. They handle cases of unexpected genetic correlations between species. But I'm not. Standard protocol, the robot interjected, now printing a small holographic ticket from a slot in its chest. Failure to comply results in immediate deportation and a 5-year ban from all Federation planets. It handed the ticket to Kane. Next visitor, please. Kane stood rooted to the spot, ticket in hand, as the robot turned its attention to the next traveler. This had to be some kind of cosmic joke. Or a scam. Yes, probably a scam. Though what the angle was, he couldn't quite figure out. Leary had finally let go of her mother's hand and was now cautiously approaching Kane. She looked up at him with those luminous violet eyes, filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Hope, perhaps, or recognition. I knew you'd come, she said simply. I've been waiting. Something about her certainty made Kane's protest die in his throat. Instead, he looked helplessly at Anea. She sighed, a very human gesture from her alien features. We should probably go to the IBPA office. They'll sort this out. She didn't sound entirely convinced, which did nothing for Kane's growing anxiety. Mom, can he come home with us after? Leary asked, her antenna perking up hopefully. Before Anea could respond, an official-looking drone hovered into view, emblazoned with the letters IBPA. Kane Harrow, Anea Vox, and Leary Vox, please follow, it announced. The Bureau representative is ready to see you now. Kane glanced longingly at the exit, calculating his odds of making a break for it. But something about the little girl's expression, so full of certainty and joy, made him hesitate. That, and the fact that the customs robot was still watching him with its unblinking scanner. Fine, he muttered, shouldering his bag. Let's get this over with. As they followed the drone, Leary slipped her small hand into his, and Kane felt an unexpected jolt. Not unpleasant, but disorienting, like the sensation of jumping to light speed. For just a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of memory, a festival under strange stars, glasses of glowing liquid, a soft laugh in the darkness. But it vanished before he could grasp it. You'll see, Leary whispered, with the confidence only a child could muster. Everything is going to be wonderful now. Kane Harrow, interplanetary technician and committed lone wolf, had never been more terrified in his life. The IBPA office was a stark contrast to the bustling spaceport, a quiet, sterile environment that reminded Kane uncomfortably of a medical facility. The walls were a soft, pulsing green that seemed designed to be calming but achieved the opposite effect. A thin humanoid with 4 arms and silvery skin greeted them, introducing himself as Administrator Plex. Fascinating case, he said, reviewing a floating holographic display. We don't often see cross-species resonance this strong without prior, acquaintance. Kane shifted uncomfortably. Look, there's been a mistake. I've never met these people before today. Plex's eyebrows, or what passed for eyebrows, raised slightly. Are you certain? Perhaps during the Festival of Moons 3 standard years ago, many visitors come to Solaris 9 for the celebration. Memory can be imperfect, especially given certain substances commonly consumed during festivities. A cold feeling settled in Kane's stomach. He had indeed visited Solaris 9 once before, briefly, during shore leave from a previous contract. He had fuzzy recollections of a celebration, streets filled with glowing flora and intoxicating aromas. I might have been here for a night or 2, he admitted reluctantly. But that doesn't mean... Dad was wearing a blue jacket, Leary interrupted excitedly, with silver buttons that looked like tiny stars, and he could make electric sparks jump between his fingers. Kane's mouth went dry. He had indeed owned such a jacket, lost during a job on Proxima B the following year. And the spark trick was something he did to amuse himself during long space flights. A simple manipulation of the static electricity that built up in certain environments. That's coincidence, he managed, though his voice lacked conviction. Plex seemed unperturbed. Perhaps, or perhaps not. Federation law is quite clear on these matters. When a genetic resonance of greater than 40% is detected between beings of different species, and one party claims paternal relation, a thorough investigation must be conducted. What kind of investigation? Kane asked suspiciously. Nothing invasive, Anea assured him, speaking up for the first time since they'd entered the office. She'd been watching the exchange with guarded eyes. Just a DNA compatibility test and a temporary cohabitation period. And what now? Kane felt like the artificial gravity had suddenly increased. Plex nodded. Standard procedure. You'll need to reside with Anea and Leary for a minimum of 7 cycles while we process the genetic verification and assess parental compatibility. 7 cycles? I'm supposed to be gone in 3. I have other contracts lined up. We've already contacted your employer, Plex said smoothly. Galactic Satellite Systems has agreed to extend your assignment to accommodate the investigation. They seemed quite amused by the situation. Actually, Kay made a mental note to have a serious conversation with his dispatcher when this was all over. And if I refuse? Immediate deportation, 5-year Federation ban, and a permanent mark on your interplanetary work record. Plex didn't sound threatening, merely factual. Additionally, Leary's legal status would be reviewed, as unclaimed progeny of mixed heritage have certain complications in their citizenship status. Kane looked at the little girl, who was now exploring the office with innocent curiosity, her antenna bobbing as she examined a pulsating plant in the corner. Something about her vulnerability struck a chord he hadn't known existed within him. Fine, he said finally. 7 cycles. But when this is all cleared up, I'm gone. Anea's expression was unreadable. Thank you, she said simply. We appreciate your cooperation. As they left the IBPA office, Leary skipping ahead of them with unbridled enthusiasm, Kane found himself wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into. 7 cycles on a strange planet with strangers who believed he was somehow a father to a child who couldn't possibly be his. Yet as Leary turned back to beam at him, her violet eyes shining with pure happiness, he felt that same strange jolt, a recognition that made no logical sense, but resonated somewhere deep within him nonetheless. Come on, Dad, she called. I want to show you our home. Anea gave him a sympathetic look. She's been talking about you for months, she said quietly. I never believed her, but she knows things she shouldn't possibly know. That doesn't make me her father, Kane replied, but the protest sounded weak even to his own ears. No, Anea agreed, but something connected you to her. Maybe it's worth finding out what. Kane had spent his adult life avoiding connections, commitments, and complications. Now all 3 had found him in the form of a lavender-skinned child with his smile. As they boarded the hover tram that would take them to Anea's home, Kane realized with growing resignation that his carefully constructed solitary existence was about to be thoroughly disrupted. And strangely, as Leary chattered excitedly about all the things she wanted to show him, he couldn't bring himself to feel entirely unhappy about it. Anea's apartment was unlike any dwelling Kane had ever entered. Located in the middle tier of a sprawling bioorganic structure, the home seemed to be partially alive, walls pulsing gently with a soft green luminescence, doorways irising open as they approached, furniture that appeared to grow directly from the floor. It's a symbiotic habitat, Anea explained, noting his bewilderment. The building is a genetically modified organism that grows and adapts to its inhabitants. It recycles air, purifies water, and even produces some basic nutritional supplements. It's alive, Kane asked, hesitantly touching a wall that seemed to hum beneath his fingertips. Semi-sentient, she clarified. It responds to basic commands and environmental needs, but it doesn't have full consciousness. Leary had already bounded ahead, disappearing through a door that spiraled open at her approach. I'm going to show Dad my room, she called back. Kane watched her go, still struggling with the surreal nature of his situation. Look, he said, turning to Anea, I think we need to talk about all of this. Anea nodded, gesturing toward what appeared to be a living area. Several cushion-like growths protruded from the floor, arranged around a central depression that contained a sort of liquid display showing abstract patterns. Please sit. Would you like a beverage? The habitat can synthesize several varieties, though I'm not sure which would be compatible with human physiology. Water is fine, Kane said, cautiously lowering himself onto one of the cushions, which adjusted its firmness to support his weight. A small spout emerged from the floor beside him, offering a clear liquid that Kane hoped was actually water. He took a tentative sip. It tasted pure enough, with a slight sweetness that wasn't unpleasant. So, he began, Leary believes I'm her father. Yes, Anea confirmed, settling onto another cushion. It started about a year ago. She began having dreams about a human man with tools and a star on his hand. She described details about you that she couldn't possibly have known. The jacket, the spark trick you mentioned, even the way you adjust your tool belt. She hesitated. At first, I thought it was just imagination. Children her age often create fantasy parents when they what? Kane prompted. When she trailed off. Anea sighed. When they don't have a complete family unit. Leary has never known her biological mother. Kane's eyebrows shot up. You're not her mother? Not biologically, no. I'm her guardian. Her mother, Alora, was my closest friend. She left Leary in my care shortly after her birth and disappeared. I've raised Leary as my own ever since. And her father? Her actual father. Unknown, Anea said carefully. Alora never disclosed who the father was. She only said that there had been an encounter during a festival of moons with a visitor to our world. Kane's mouth went dry again. The timeline matched his brief visit to Solaris 9. But still, it was biologically impossible, wasn't it? Interspecies reproduction isn't possible without significant genetic engineering, he said, voicing his thoughts. Typically, Anea agreed. But Alora was a genetic researcher. Her work focused on interspecies compatibility. She was brilliant, but not always conventional in her methods. Before Kane could process this disturbing information, Leary reappeared, carrying what looked like a handcrafted doll with dark hair and pale skin, a crude but recognizable human figure. Look, Dad, I made this. It's you. She thrust the doll toward Kane with obvious pride. I used pictures from the spaceport databanks, but they didn't show your star hand, so I had to add that myself. Kane accepted the doll, noting the small, sparkly mark on its right hand. The attention to detail was both touching and unnerving. It's very good, he managed. You're quite talented. Leary beamed at the praise. I knew you'd like it. I've made lots of things for you. Want to see my collection of spaceship models? I have 17 different designs. Before Kane could respond, a chiming sound emanated from somewhere within the apartment. Anea rose gracefully. That's the nutrition cycle alert. Dinner is being synthesized. She looked at Kane apologetically. I hope the habitat can produce something suitable for your dietary requirements. I have universal digestive implants, Kane assured her. Standard issue for interplanetary workers. I can eat pretty much anything that isn't actively toxic to carbon-based life. Leary giggled. Dad's funny, she declared, taking his hand again with that easy familiarity that continued to startle him. Come on, I'll show you where we eat. The table sometimes sings if you compliment the food. As he allowed himself to be led through the apartment by the enthusiastic child, Kane caught Anea watching them with an expression that mingled hope with caution. He had the distinct feeling that she knew more than she was sharing, but pressing for information with Leary present seemed unwise. For now, he'd play along. 7 cycles would pass quickly enough. The IBPA would determine there was no biological connection, and he'd be on his way. No complications, no attachments, no sudden fatherhood thrust upon him. But as Leary chattered away, pointing out features of the apartment with infectious enthusiasm, Kane couldn't help but notice how her smile created the same crinkle at the corners of her eyes that he saw in his own reflection. A coincidence, surely. It had to be. The dining experience proved to be as bizarre as the rest of his day. The table was actually a circular platform that rose from the floor, its surface covered with various depressions containing what Kane assumed were foods, though their colors and textures range from familiar to utterly alien. The blue stuff is protein concentrate, Leary informed him authoritatively. It tastes like, I think humans call it chicken. The purple things are sweet, and the glowing ones make your tongue tingle. Perhaps Kane would prefer something less adventurous for his first meal here, Aeneas suggested diplomatically. True to Leary's word, when Kane cautiously complimented a dish, a pale orange substance with the consistency of risotto, the table emitted a series of harmonious tones that somehow conveyed pleasure. The habitat responds to positive reinforcement, Aeneas explained, noticing his startled expression. It's part of the symbiotic relationship. Appreciation encourages more efficient nutrient production. Our last apartment was boring, Leary announced between mouthfuls of glowing food. It didn't sing or change colors or anything. But Mom got promoted at the Botanical Archives, so we could afford a better place. You work at the Botanical Archives? Kane asked Aeneas, grateful for any topic that didn't involve his alleged paternity. She nodded. I'm a preservation specialist. I document and maintain records of plant species from across the galaxy. It's important work. As interplanetary travel increases, so does the risk of biodiversity loss. Mom knows everything about plants, Leary said proudly. She can make anything grow. Even the things the habitat can't digest, she keeps in special containers. She pointed to a wall lined with transparent pods containing various unusual specimens. It was oddly domestic, this dinner with strangers who somehow didn't feel entirely like strangers. The conversation flowed more easily than Kane had expected, with Leary serving as an enthusiastic bridge between the adults, peppering Kane with questions about his travels and sharing details of her daily life in return. By the time the meal concluded, Kane found himself relaxing slightly, though the underlying strangeness of his situation remained. Their relative peace was interrupted by a soft chime from Aeneas' communication device. Her expression tightened as she checked the message. The IBPA has scheduled your genetic compatibility test for tomorrow morning, she informed Kane. They're expediting the process due to the unusual circumstances. Good, Kane said. The sooner we clear this up, the better. Leary, who had been happily drawing patterns in the remnants of her food, looked up with sudden concern. You're not leaving, are you, Dad? The mixture of hope and fear in her voice struck Kane with unexpected force. I have to take a test first, he said carefully, to figure some things out. But you know you're my dad, she insisted. You just forgot for a while. It's okay. Mom says memories get lost sometimes, but they can come back. Kane looked helplessly at Aeneas, who intervened smoothly. It's getting late, Leary. Time to prepare for sleep. Why don't you show Kane where he'll be staying tonight, and then I'll come help with your evening routine. This successfully diverted Leary, who jumped up eagerly. Your room is next to mine. The habitat grew its special when I told it you were coming. As they followed Leary down a corridor that seemed to shift its hues to match their passing, Aeneas spoke quietly to Kane. I know this is overwhelming. I don't expect you to play along with everything she believes. But please be gentle with her hopes. Whatever the test shows tomorrow, she's convinced herself you're the father she's been waiting for. I never asked for this, Kane responded, equally quiet. I don't know the first thing about being a father. I've spent my life avoiding exactly this kind of entanglement. None of us asked for the complicated paths our lives take, Aeneas replied, with a sad smile that suggested deeper currents beneath her composed exterior. We simply do our best to navigate them with minimal damage to those who depend on us. The wisdom in her words gave Kane pause. Before he could formulate a response, they reached a doorway that opened to reveal a surprisingly comfortable-looking chamber. Unlike the rest of the apartment, this room seemed deliberately designed with human preferences in mind, a flat sleeping platform rather than the nest-like arrangement he'd glimpsed in other rooms, lighting that resembled Earth's natural spectrum, even what appeared to be a water-based cleaning facility. I told the habitat all about what humans like, Leary announced proudly. From my research vids, Did I get it right? Kane found himself genuinely touched by the effort. It's perfect, he said, and meant it. Thank you, Leary. She beamed at him with such unfiltered joy that Kane felt a strange ache in his chest, a mixture of guilt and something else he couldn't quite identify. Okay, time for sleep preparations, Anea intervened. Say good night to Kane, Leary. Instead of simply saying good night, Leary launched herself at Kane, wrapping her small arms around his waist in a tight hug. Night, Dad, she said into his shirt. I'm so glad you're finally home. Kane stood frozen, hands hovering uncertainly before lightly, awkwardly, patting her back. Good night, Leary, he managed. As Anea guided the child away, Kane retreated into his room, the door spiraling closed behind him. He sat heavily on the edge of the sleeping platform, head in his hands. What had he gotten himself into? And more disturbingly, why did part of him, a part he'd spent years silencing, feel a pull toward the domestic scene he'd just experienced? This isn't me, he muttered to himself. This isn't my life. Yet as he lay down on the surprisingly comfortable bed, Kane couldn't shake the image of Leary's trusting smile or the weight of her small arms around him. The first genuine human contact he'd experienced in longer than he cared to remember. 7 cycles, he reminded himself. Just 7 cycles, and then back to normal. Back to freedom, solitude, and the uncomplicated life he'd built for himself. So why did that thought no longer bring the comfort it once had? The genetic testing facility within the IBPA headquarters was a sterile, white environment that seemed deliberately designed to intimidate. Kane sat rigidly in a contoured chair while a multi-armed medical drone hovered around him, collecting samples with efficient precision. This won't hurt, the drone announced in a voice that managed to be simultaneously soothing and clinical. We require a cellular sample, a neural resonance mapping, and a chronological memory scan. What now? Kane jerked back as the drone produced a device that looked uncomfortably like a miniature mind probe. The memory scan is standard procedure in disputed paternity cases, Administrator Plex explained from where he observed the process. We find that genetic material tells only part of the story. Memories, even those suppressed or altered, provide valuable context. Nobody's scanning my brain, Kane growled. That wasn't part of the agreement. Plex's expression remained neutral. I'm afraid it is non-negotiable under Federation Protocol 773B. However, I assure you the process is non-invasive and we only access memories relevant to the investigation. Kane glanced at Anea, who waited on the other side of the room with Leary. They had undergone their testing first, a process Leary had approached with excited chatter about proving what she already knew. Fine, Kane muttered, seeing little choice. Let's get this over with. The memory scanner, when applied, was indeed physically painless, though the sensation of something rifling through his memories was profoundly unsettling. Images flashed through his mind, most too quick to grasp, but occasionally one would linger. The Festival of Moons 3 years ago, a crowded plaza filled with glowing flora, a drink that tasted like liquid starlight, a woman with lavender skin and a brilliant smile. Kane gasped as the scanner withdrew. That final image had been more vivid than the others. Elora, it must have been, Leary's biological mother. He remembered her now, though the memory had been buried beneath the haze of whatever intoxicants had been in that festival drink. Interesting, Plex commented, reviewing the data. There appears to be a significant memory suppression pattern consistent with the effects of lunar nectar, a traditional beverage served during the Festival of Moons. It's renowned for creating intense experiences while inhibiting long-term memory formation in certain species, humans among them. Are you saying I did? Meet Elora? Kane asked, his throat suddenly dry. The memory fragments suggest interaction. Yes, Plex confirmed, though the nature and extent would require further analysis. The medical drone had meanwhile completed its other tests and was now synthesizing the results. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing complex genetic sequences and compatibility markers. Preliminary analysis indicates a 78% genetic resonance pattern, the drone announced. This exceeds the threshold for statistical coincidence, and falls within parameters for intentional genetic modification, resulting in viable interspecies progeny. The clinical language couldn't mask the bombshell contained within it. Kane felt his world tilt sideways. That's impossible, he stammered. Humans and whatever Leary's species is, we can't reproduce naturally. The Solarans, Aeneas supplied quietly. And no, not naturally. But as I mentioned, Elora was a genetic researcher. Her specialty was interspecies compatibility. The implication struck Kane with the force of a meteor impact. Are you saying she used my genetic material? Without my knowledge or consent? Little one, she said softly. Where did you go? Leary asked, the simple question containing volumes of hurt and confusion. A complicated story, Elora replied. For another time. She turned to face Administrator Plex. I understand you're conducting a paternity investigation. Plex seemed momentarily flustered by her authoritative presence. Yes, Citizen Elora. As you can see, we've detected a significant genetic resonance between the human Kane Harrow and the child Leary. Perhaps you might provide context for these findings? Perhaps I might, she agreed coolly, though I prefer a more private setting. Kane found his voice at last. No, he said firmly. No more secrets. If I'm somehow biologically connected to Leary, I deserve to know exactly how and why. Elora regarded him with an appraising gaze. Very well. 3 years ago, during the Festival of Moons, we met. The connection was significant, more than the usual festival dalliance. Fragments of memory stirred in Kane's mind. Laughter under violet skies, the touch of cool hands against his skin, conversations about stars and distant worlds. You were different from other visitors, Elora continued. Intelligent, curious, and genetically fascinating. A faint smile touched her lips. I was deep in my research then, exploring the possibilities of interspecies genetic compatibility. Most believe it impossible without extensive engineering and artificial gestation. And it is, Kane interjected. At least, that's what every xenobiologist I've ever met has claimed. Most xenobiologists lack both imagination and courage, Elora replied dismissively. I had developed a technique that could identify resonant genetic patterns between species and amplify them while suppressing incompatible sequences. But I needed a subject whose genetic structure contained certain rare markers. Her gaze intensified. You possessed those markers. So you, what? Drugged me with that lunar nectar and collected my DNA? Kane felt a surge of anger. Nothing so crude, Elora countered. We shared a genuine connection. The nectar affects memory, yes, but not consciousness or consent. You knew what my work involved. You were enthusiastic about advancing science. Kane frowned, trying to reconcile this with his patchy recollections. Had he really agreed to participate in some experimental genetic project? It seemed out of character, yet something about Elora's presence stirred emotions he couldn't easily dismiss. Even if that's true, he said, there's a vast difference between donating genetic material for research and creating a child. Leary was unexpected, Elora admitted, her composure slipping slightly. The compatibility was far higher than my models predicted. What should have been simply viable cellular cultures developed with remarkable speed and stability. For the first time, a genuine smile softened her features. She was a miracle, the first true cross-species child born without artificial gestation. Throughout this exchange, Aenea had remained silent, her expression increasingly troubled. Now she spoke, her voice tight with controlled emotion. What you're not explaining, Elora, is why you disappeared. Why you left your miracle for me to raise alone. A shadow crossed Elora's face. Because my research attracted unwanted attention. The genetic purification front learned of my work and of Leary's existence. They consider such hybridization an abomination. They would have taken her for study, or worse. Her voice hardened. I led them away from Solaris 9, scattered false research trails across a dozen systems. I've spent 3 years ensuring they could never trace my work back to her. And now you've returned, Aenea observed. Why? Because the danger has passed. Elora stated. The front's leadership has been arrested by Federation authorities. Their organization is in disarray. She turned to Kane, and because Leary began speaking of her father, with details she couldn't possibly know, I realized something unexpected had occurred. A genetic resonance so strong it created a psychic connection. Kane looked at Leary, who had been following this adult conversation with remarkable attentiveness for a child her age. "Is that true?" he asked her directly. "Did you see me somehow? In your mind?" Leary nodded solemnly. "In my dreams. You were fixing things on different planets. Sometimes you looked sad. I wanted to tell you it was okay, that you had a family waiting." Her violet eyes, so eerily similar to his own in expression despite their alien color, fixed on him with perfect trust. "I knew you'd come eventually." The weight of this revelation, of Leary's certainty and Elora's explanations, settled over Kane like a heavy cloak. Administrator Plex, who had been observing the emotionally charged exchange with scientific detachment, cleared his throat. "Given these extraordinary circumstances, the IBPA will need to file a special classification report. In the meantime, the standard protocol applies, a cohabitation period to assess parental compatibility." He turned to Elora. "Your return complicates matters, Citizen Elora. Do you intend to petition for maternal custody reassignment from Citizen Anea?" A flash of alarm crossed Anea's face, and Kane found himself instinctively moving closer to her and Leary. The bond between them was obvious, whatever Elora's biological connection. Anea had been the one raising Leary with love and stability. Elora's expression softened as she watched this subtle movement. "No," she said, surprising them all. "Anea has been everything a mother should be. My role now is to ensure Leary's safety and provide context for her unique heritage." She hesitated. "If you're amenable, Anea, I would welcome the opportunity to be part of her life again, but not at the expense of the security you've provided." The tension in Anea's shoulders eased slightly, though wariness remained in her eyes. "We should discuss this privately," she said. "Indeed," Plex agreed. "For now, the cohabitation directive stands. Kane Harrow will reside with Anea and Leary for the standard assessment period." He paused, glancing at his data display. "Additionally, given the unusual genetic circumstances, the IBPA is assigning a monitoring drone to document paternal interactions and compatibility indicators." "And what?" Kane asked. As if in response, a small, spherical drone detached itself from the ceiling and hovered down to eye level. "Paternal assessment drone activated," it announced in a cheerful voice. "I will be observing and recording quality of paternal engagement, emotional resonance, and caregiving aptitude. Please proceed with normal family activities." Kane stared at the drone with horror. "You expect me to be supervised? Like some kind of criminal?" "Not a criminal," Plex corrected. "A potential parent of a genetically unique child with significant scientific and sociological importance. The Federation takes such matters very seriously." Before Kane could protest further, a priority alert chimed from Plex's console. His silvery face tightened as he reviewed the incoming message. "Troubling," he murmured, then addressed the group. "It appears there's been a security breach. Someone accessed our records regarding today's testing. The protocol suggests this could be connected to the genetic purification front that Citizen Elora mentioned." Elora's composure cracked. "Impossible. Their leadership was arrested. Organizations rarely die with their leaders," Plex noted grimly, "especially those fueled by ideological extremism." Kane felt a chill of premonition. If they're still active and they've accessed these records, then they know about Leary, Anea finished, instinctively drawing the child closer to her side. "And they know where to find her," Elora added, fear evident in her voice for the first time. For Kane, something shifted in that moment. The abstract concept of biological connection to Leary suddenly crystallized into something more immediate and visceral. A child, his child, however unconventionally created, was potentially in danger. Years of avoiding attachment and responsibility seemed to fall away as a surprisingly powerful protective instinct surged through him. "We need to go," he said decisively. Now, back to your apartment, where we can secure the location and figure out our next steps. Anea nodded, clearly thinking along the same lines. The habitat has defensive capabilities I've never had to activate. It can seal itself against intruders. I'm coming with you, Alora stated, not a request, but a declaration. Kane didn't argue. Whatever complicated history existed between them, Alora's expertise regarding both the GPF and Leary's unique genetics might prove essential. As they hurried from the IBPA facility, Leary skipping between them seemingly oblivious to the adult's tension, the monitoring drone bobbed along behind them, still cheerfully announcing, assessing paternal protective response. Rating, highly favorable. Kane shot the drone an irritated glance, but his mind was already racing ahead, cataloging potential security weaknesses in Anea's living quarters, mentally inventorying the tools he carried that might serve as impromptu weapons if needed. The technician's analytical mind that had served him well across countless solitary jobs was now focusing with laser precision on a single priority: keeping Leary safe. It was only as they boarded the hovertram back to Anea's sector that Kane realized how completely his priorities had shifted in the span of a single day. The man who had arrived on Solaris 9, concerned only with completing a job and moving on, was now calculating escape routes and defensive positions for a family he hadn't known existed 24 hours ago. The tram hummed through the city's arterial transit tubes, the purple-tinted world outside blurring into streaks of color. Leary had grown quiet, perhaps finally sensing the tension among the adults. She sat between Kane and Anea, small fingers entwined with Kane's larger ones in a gesture so natural it was as if they'd been doing it forever. "Kane," she said suddenly, using his name for the first time instead of Dad, "are the bad people coming after us because of me?" The direct question, asked with such clear-eyed perception, caught him off guard. He glanced at Anea, who nodded slightly, encouragement to answer honestly. "Maybe," he said carefully, "but not because you did anything wrong. Because you're special, very special, and sometimes people are afraid of special things they don't understand." Leary considered this, her antenna quivering slightly in what Kane was beginning to recognize as a sign of deep thought. Like how Zex in my learning pod was afraid of the morphing plants until teachers showed him they were harmless. Something like that, Kane agreed, surprised by her insight. But these people, they might not be willing to learn they're wrong. Then we'll have to keep them away until they can learn better, Leary decided with childish logic but impressive determination. She squeezed Kane's hand. "It's okay. You fix broken things. You can fix this too." The simple faith in her declaration struck Kane deeply. All his life, he had indeed fixed things, machines, systems, circuitry, but always with the luxury of emotional distance. The broken things had never mattered to him personally. They were just puzzles to solve before moving on. This was different. This wasn't a malfunctioning satellite or a damaged relay station. This was a child, his child, trusting him to fix a situation that threatened her very existence. As the tram slowed at their destination, Kane made a silent promise to himself and to the small lavender girl whose hand remained confidently in his. He would not run from this responsibility. Whatever came next, he would face it, not as the detached loner he'd always been, but as the father Leary believed him to be. The journey back to Anea's apartment was tense, but uneventful. Kane found himself scanning every passerby with suspicion, hyper-aware of potential threats in a way his normally relaxed demeanor would never have suggested. Alora moved with similar wariness, her elegant posture now reminiscent of a predator ready to strike at the first sign of danger. They reached the bioorganic building without incident, the undulating exterior seeming to ripple in recognition as they approached. Inside the apartment, Anea immediately moved to a control panel that had been discreetly integrated into a living wall. "Habitat Security Protocol Alpha," she commanded. The apartment responded with a series of low pulses, doorways constricting slightly, windows developing a thicker, more opaque membrane. The habitat's defensive systems are designed to protect against environmental hazards, Anea explained as she worked. But they can be repurposed for security. The outer membrane will now resist cutting tools and most energy weapons. The entrance will only admit recognized biosignatures. Impressive, Kane commented, already moving through the space with a technician's eye, identifying potential weaknesses and strengths. But we should prepare for the possibility they have ways around biological security. Elora, who had been silent during their return journey, now approached a wall console. "If I may," she asked Anea, who nodded permission after only slight hesitation. Elora's fingers danced across the living interface. "I helped design some of these habitats before I left. There are additional security features that aren't in the standard protocols." As the two women worked to secure the dwelling, Kane turned his attention to Leary, who had retreated to what appeared to be a play area, surrounded by her collection of handcrafted items, including, he noted with a pang, numerous representations of himself in various forms. "Hey," he said gently, crouching beside her. "How are you doing with all this excitement?" Leary looked up from where she was organizing small figurines into what appeared to be a defensive formation. "I'm making a plan," she said seriously. "See, these are us." She pointed to 4 figurines in the center. "And these are the habitat's defenses." Smaller objects formed a circle around them. "And if the bad people try to get in, we can escape through the emergency tunnels." She demonstrated with a sweeping gesture that moved the central figurines to one side. Kane blinked in surprise. "Emergency tunnels?" Leary nodded. "All habitats have them. Mom showed me when we first moved in. For fires or toxic spills or stuff." Kane made a mental note to ask Anea about these tunnels. They could indeed prove critical to an emergency evacuation plan. But more than the tactical information, he was struck by Leary's composure. Rather than dissolving into fear at their situation, she was processing it in her own way through play that mirrored their reality. "That's very smart thinking," he told her, genuine admiration in his voice. "You know, in my work, I always have to plan escape routes too, in case a repair goes wrong." Leary's antenna perked up with interest. "Really? What's the scariest place you ever had to escape from?" Kane found himself recounting a sanitized version of a particularly harrowing repair on a mining station orbiting a volatile gas giant, how the electromagnetic fluctuations had damaged his ship's navigation system, requiring him to manually pilot through debris fields to reach safety. Leary listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking surprisingly insightful questions about his technical solutions. It wasn't until they were deep in discussion about the relative merits of manual versus automated emergency protocols that Kane realized the paternal assessment drone was hovering nearby, recording their interaction with what he could have sworn was an air of approval. Observing educational engagement, the drone chirped. Rating, exceptional. Kane resisted the urge to swat the irritating machine from the air. "Why does the floating ball keep talking about you?" Leary asked curiously. Kane searched for an age-appropriate explanation. "It's helping me learn how to be a good dad," he finally said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "Since I'm new at this." Leary considered this with adorable seriousness. "You're doing pretty good so far," she declared. "I'd give you," she thought for a moment, 8 stars out of 10. "Only 8. Kane found himself asking with mock indignation. "You haven't read me a bedtime story yet," she pointed out practically. "That's worth at least 2 stars. Kane couldn't help laughing, a release of tension he hadn't realized had built to such levels. "Well, I'll have to work on improving my rating then." Leary beamed at him, and something in Kane's chest tightened at the guileless affection in her expression. It was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain emotional distance from this child who accepted him so completely. Their moment was interrupted by Anea's approach. "The habitat is as secure as we can make it," she reported. "Elora is monitoring communication channels for any sign of GPF activity." "Good," Kane nodded. Leary mentioned emergency tunnels. "Yes, they're the network that connects to other habitats and eventually to main thoroughfares," Anea confirmed. "I've ensured our access points are functional but concealed." They spoke quietly, developing contingency plans while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for Leary's sake. As evening approached, Anea prepared a meal using the habitat's synthesis capabilities, and they gathered around the table in a scene of domestic tranquility that belied the tension humming beneath the surface. Elora joined them, her elegant features drawn with concern. "I've detected unusual communication patterns in the sector," she reported. "Encrypted transmissions using old GPF frequencies." "How soon?" Kane asked simply. "Hours, perhaps." Elora's gaze drifted to Leary, who was attempting to teach her food to sing as it had the previous night. They're coordinating, gathering resources. The unspoken understanding passed between the adults. They needed to be ready to move quickly if necessary. The relative safety of the habitat might not last long against a determined, organized attack. As the meal concluded and Leary's evening routine began, Kane found himself drawn into the domestic rhythm, helping to clear away dishes, listening as Anea explained the habitat's recycling processes, observing the gentle interactions between guardian and child that spoke of years of loving care. When the time came for Leary to sleep, she looked expectantly at Kane. "Story time," she announced. "That's how I get a 10 stars." Kane froze, unprepared for this ritual. He'd never been much of a storyteller, his communication skills honed for technical reports and terse negotiations, not childhood fantasies. Seeing his hesitation, Anea began to intervene, but Kane raised a hand to stop her. "No, it's okay. I can do this." He wasn't entirely sure why it suddenly mattered so much that he tried, only that the thought of disappointing Leary seemed unbearable. As Leary settled into her nest-like bed, Kane sat awkwardly on its edge, searching his memory for any story appropriate for a child. Finding nothing suitable in his limited repertoire, he found himself instead beginning to speak of his first journey to the stars, of the wonder he'd felt seeing Earth diminish to a pale blue, of the breathtaking beauty of nebulae viewed from a ship's observation deck, of the strange and marvelous beings he'd encountered on distant worlds. It wasn't a traditional bedtime story with neat morals or talking animals, but Leary listened with fascination, her eyes growing heavy despite her obvious desire to hear more. When Kane finally fell silent, thinking she had drifted off, her small voice surprised him. "That was worth 3 stars, she murmured sleepily. "You're up to 11 now." Something broke open in Kane's chest, a warm, unfamiliar feeling that spread through him like the golden light of a gentle sun. Without thinking, he brushed a strand of hair from Leary's forehead, his fingers lingering briefly on her soft skin. "Sleep well, Starshine," he whispered, the endearment rising unbidden from some hidden wellspring. As he rose to leave, he found Anea watching from the doorway, an unreadable expression on her face. The paternal assessment drone hovered beside her, its mechanical voice uncommonly subdued, as it noted, affectionate caregiving behaviors observed. Rating optimal. For once, the drone's commentary didn't irritate Kane. He was too preoccupied with the realization that the hastily erected emotional walls he'd maintained since his arrival were crumbling with alarming speed. And even more disturbing, he wasn't sure he wanted to rebuild them. The transformation occurring within him would have to wait for further examination. However, as he joined Anea and Elora in the main living area, the urgent reality of their situation reasserted itself. "They're coming," Elora stated without preamble. "Thermal scans show multiple figures converging on this sector. Their movement patterns are too coordinated to be coincidental." Kane's newly awakened protective instinct flared. "How long?" "An hour. Maybe less." Anea moved to the security console, her fingers flying across the interface. "The habitat is registering unusual vibrations from adjacent structures. They may be attempting to access the emergency tunnels." "Then we need to move first," Kane decided. "Wake Leary. Pack only what's essential. We'll use the tunnels before they can cut off our escape." As Anea hurried to prepare Leary, Elora stepped closer to Kane, her voice low. "There's something you should know. The GPF doesn't just want to study Leary. They want to eradicate her. In their twisted ideology, cross-species hybrids represent a corruption of natural order. They believe her very existence threatens the genetic purity of all involved species." The cold fury that swept through Kane at these words surprised him with its intensity. They won't touch her, he stated, the promise carrying the weight of absolute certainty. I won't let them. Elora studied him, seemingly reassured by what she saw. You've changed since the festival, she observed. The man I met then was charming, brilliant, but rootless, detached. I'm still that man, Cain protested, though the words rang hollow even to his own ears. No, Elora said simply. You're becoming something more. A father. She touched his arm briefly. It suits you better than you know. Before Cain could formulate a response to this unsettling observation, Anea returned with a drowsy Leary bundled in warm clothes, a small pack on her back. She's ready, Anea reported. I've programmed the least predictable route through the tunnel network into our comm devices. Cain nodded, mentally shifting into the focused state that had seen him through countless dangerous repair missions in hostile environments. I'll lead. Elora, you take rear guard. Anea and Leary in the middle. He checked his tool belt, selecting items that might serve as weapons if needed. The monitoring drone stays here. It will only draw attention. Negative, the drone chirped, bobbing in the air. Assessment protocols require continuous observation, particularly during high-stress scenarios, which reveal genuine parental instincts. Cain gritted his teeth. You're going to get us all killed. The drone's outer shell is designed to absorb and scatter detection scans. Elora interjected. It might actually help mask our biosignatures. There was no time to argue further. The habitat's walls had begun to pulse with a rhythmic warning pattern, its primitive way of signaling imminent threat. Anea pressed her hand to a section of wall that appeared no different from any other, but which slid open to reveal a narrow passage. The tunnels, she explained. They connect to the central municipal utility ducts eventually. Cain took a final look around the apartment, at the cozy, living space that had briefly given him a taste of domestic life he'd never thought he wanted. Then he turned to the small group that now depended on him. A child who called him father, two women who had entrusted him with their safety. Let's go, he said, stepping into the passage. Stay close, move quietly, and no matter what happens, we stick together. As the wall sealed behind them, plunging them into the dim, bioluminescent glow of the maintenance tunnels, Cain felt Leary's small hand slip into his once more. The gesture centering him, focusing his resolve. Whatever lay ahead, whatever danger they faced, he would protect this unexpected family with everything he had. The realization no longer frightened him. Instead, it filled him with a clarity of purpose he'd never known in his years of solitary wandering. The biokinetic tunnels pulsed with muted blue light, their walls contracting and expanding in slow, rhythmic movements that helped push clean air through the habitat network. Cain led the group forward cautiously, years of working in hazardous environments making him acutely sensitive to any changes in their surroundings. These tunnels are semi-sentient, Anea explained in a hushed voice as they navigated a junction. They respond to stress hormones. If we remain calm, they'll stay open and functioning. And if we panic, Cain asked, already suspecting the answer. They constrict to protect the larger habitat structure, she confirmed. An evolutionary defense mechanism. Helpful, Cain thought grimly. The tunnels would literally close in on them if they showed fear, which, given they were being pursued by genetic purists intent on capturing or killing Leary, seemed like a rather significant design flaw. They moved as quickly as caution allowed, the monitoring drone hovering silently behind them, its earlier chatter mercifully muted. Leary remained remarkably composed, though her grip on Cain's hand tightened whenever unusual sounds echoed through the organic passages. You're doing great, Starshine, Cain murmured to her during a brief pause while Anea consulted the tunnel map on her comm device. Brave as any spacer I've ever met. Leary's antenna quivered with what he now recognized as pleasure at the compliment. I'm pretending we're explorers on a secret mission, she whispered back. Like in my adventure vids. Smart strategy, Cain approved, amazed at her resilience. Children, he was discovering, were far more adaptable than adults often gave them credit for. 3 more junctions, and we'll reach the municipal utility hub, Anea reported. From there, we can access the public transit system. And go where? Elora questioned from her position, guarding their rear. They'll be monitoring all official transport routes. It was a question Kane had been pondering since they entered the tunnels. My ship, he decided. It's small, but it's fast and the registration is flexible. Years of working in legally ambiguous situations had taught him the value of having transport that couldn't be easily tracked. We can break atmosphere before they realize we've gone off-world. And then, Anea pressed, the unspoken question clear in her eyes. Was this the beginning of a life on the run, or merely a temporary retreat? One step at a time, Kane replied, not ready to commit to the larger implications of what they were doing. First, we get to safety. Then we figure out the rest. A sudden shift in the tunnel's rhythm, a momentary contraction that nearly squeezed them together, alerted Kane that something had changed. He raised a hand, signaling for silence, every sense straining. The faintest vibration trembled through the spongy floor beneath them. Not the natural pulse of the living structure, but something mechanical. Regular. Deliberate. They're in the tunnels, he breathed, using some kind of sonic device to track through the habitat tissue. Elora's face tightened. GPF tactical units. They have specialized equipment for penetrating biogenic structures. How far to the next junction? Kane asked Anea tersely. 50 meters. But they might be coming from that direction, too. Kane made a split-second decision. Change of plan. We're not heading for the central hub. Too obvious. Is there a way to access the surface from here? Somewhere unpredictable. Anea consulted her map, fingers moving rapidly across the display. Yes, there's a maintenance port that opens into a botanical garden about 200 meters ahead, then right at the next two junctions. It's rarely used. That's our exit, Kane decided. Move quickly, but stay quiet. They increased their pace, the tunnel seeming to sense their urgency as its natural contractions accelerated, helping to propel them forward. The vibrations behind them grew stronger. Whoever was tracking them was gaining ground. At the second junction, just as they prepared to make the final turn toward their escape route, a section of wall ahead of them suddenly bulged and then split open. Three figures emerged, humanoid but encased in sleek protective suits designed to interface with the biological environment without triggering its defenses. GPF Purification Unit, Elora hissed, immediately pushing Leary behind her. The lead figure raised a device that Kane recognized as a genetic scanner, its targeting beam sweeping over their group and pausing as it reached Leary. Target confirmed, the figure announced, voice distorted by its breathing apparatus. Genetic anomaly detected. All units converge on junction 47B. Kane didn't hesitate. From his tool belt, he pulled a sonic calibrator, normally used for adjusting delicate satellite components, and twisted its settings to maximum frequency. The tunnel's semi-sentient tissue was sensitive to sonic vibrations. What would happen if those vibrations became suddenly, violently chaotic? He was about to find out. "Cover your ears," he shouted, then activated the calibrator at its highest setting, aiming it at the tunnel ceiling directly above the GPF agents. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The tunnel convulsed as if in agony, its walls contracting violently around the source of distress. The GPF agents were caught in the sudden muscular spasm of the living structure, their protective suits offering little defense against tons of contracting biological matter. "Run," Kane urged, grabbing Leary and practically carrying her as they sprinted past the struggling agents, following Anea's lead toward the maintenance port. Behind them, more violent contractions spread through the tunnel network as the habitat's defense systems fully engaged, triggered by the sonic disruption. They reached the maintenance port, a sphincter-like opening that Anea activated with an emergency override code. It dilated reluctantly, the habitat's systems confused by the conflicting signals of danger and authorized access. "Hurry," Elora urged as the opening widened, just enough for them to squeeze through one at a time. Anea went first, then helped pull Leary through the narrow gap. The monitoring drone barely managed to compress its spherical form enough to follow. Kane gestured for Elora to go next. "I'll hold them off if they break free." Don't be heroic, she cautioned, but climbed through the opening. Kane took one last look behind them. The tunnel was still convulsing, but he could see the GPF agents beginning to deploy some kind of stabilizing field generator. They wouldn't be contained for long. He squeezed through the maintenance port just as it began to contract again, the habitat sealing itself against the perceived invasion. They emerged into the cool night air of an expansive botanical garden, the purple sky above them dotted with stars and the 3 moons of Solaris 9. We need to keep moving, Kane urged, orienting himself. The spaceport is on the other side of the city center. The gardens connect to an automated transit line, Anea informed them, already leading the way through dense foliage that glowed faintly with bioluminescence. It's a cargo system, not passenger, but it runs directly to the spaceport for botanical shipments. They moved as quickly as Leary's shorter legs would allow, the child now showing signs of fatigue despite her remarkable composure. Without a word, Kane scooped her up, settling her on his shoulders in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. I can see everything from up here, she whispered, her small hands gripping his head for balance. Like being on a space station observatory deck. Kane felt a surge of protectiveness so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. This child, this impossible, miraculous being who was somehow his daughter, trusted him completely, despite having known him for barely a day. The weight of that trust settled on his shoulders alongside her physical presence, a responsibility he would once have fled but now embraced without hesitation. They reached the automated transit loading area, a series of open cargo platforms that moved along a magnetic track, carrying exotic botanical specimens to and from the spaceport. Currently deserted in the late night hours, it offered perfect cover for their escape. The next cargo shipment departs in 10 minutes, Anea noted, checking the automated schedule. We can hide among the plant containers. As they waited in the shadows, Kane gently lowered Leary from his shoulders, crouching to meet her eye level. How are you holding up, Starshine? I'm okay, she assured him, though fatigue was evident in her drooping antenna. Are we going on your spaceship? That's the plan, he confirmed. It's not very big, and it's certainly not fancy, but it's fast and reliable. Can I see the engine room? Leary asked, a spark of her earlier enthusiasm returning. I've been studying propulsion systems in my science modules. Kane couldn't help but smile at her resilience. Absolutely. Maybe you can even help me run a diagnostic once we're safely in orbit. The paternal assessment drone, which had remained mercifully silent throughout their flight, chose this moment to resume its commentary. Observing educational engagement during crisis conditions. Rating, exemplary. I thought we disabled its vocal functions, Kane muttered to Alora, who stood nearby keeping watch. It seems to have overridden the command, she replied with a hint of amusement. It appears quite determined to complete its assessment, regardless of circumstances. Before Kane could respond, the automated cargo platform hummed to life, its magnetic generators powering up for the scheduled departure. They quickly moved to board, concealing themselves among large containers of exotic flora bound for off-world destinations. As the platform began to glide silently along its track, Kane felt a momentary lightening of the tension that had gripped him since they'd fled the apartment. They were moving, making progress toward escape. His ship, the Stellar Nomad, waited at the spaceport, fueled and ready for departure as he always kept it. Within an hour, they could be breaking atmosphere, leaving Solaris 9 and the GPF far behind. The cargo platform increased speed as it left the botanical gardens, entering a dedicated transit tunnel that would carry them directly to the spaceport's receiving area. Leary had dozed off, her head resting against Aenea's shoulder, while Alora maintained vigilant watch and the monitoring drone hovered nearby. Kane, Aenea said softly, breaking the relative silence. What happens after we reach your ship? What's the plan? It was the question he'd been avoiding, the one that forced him to confront how completely his life had changed in the span of a single day. We find somewhere safe, he answered, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Somewhere the GPF can't reach. I have contacts on unaffiliated worlds, places beyond Federation jurisdiction. And then, Alora pressed. Leary needs stability, education, community. She'll have it, Kane stated, the decision crystallizing within him even as he spoke the words aloud. We'll create it for her. Together. The implication hung in the air between them. A commitment far beyond the immediate crisis, an acknowledgement that their fates were now inexorably linked. This isn't what you signed up for, Anea observed, her eyes searching his face. Yesterday, you were a free agent with no ties, no responsibilities beyond your next contract. Kane looked at Leary, peacefully sleeping despite the danger they fled. Yesterday, I didn't know I had a daughter, he said simply. Today I do. Everything else is just details to be worked out. The paternal assessment drone bobbed in what might have been approval. Final assessment compilation in progress. Preliminary rating. Exceptional paternal adaptation observed. For once, Kane didn't find the drone's commentary irritating. In a strange way, its clinical validation confirmed what he was already feeling. That despite the unconventional circumstances, the connection between himself and Leary was real and profound. The moment of relative peace was shattered by a sudden deceleration of the cargo platform, its smooth glide jerking to an unscheduled halt. Warning lights flashed along the transit tunnel, and an automated announcement echoed around them. Attention! Security override activated. All transit systems temporarily suspended by order of planetary security. Please remain in place for identification verification. Alora's expression hardened. They've locked down the transport network. The GPF must have influence within planetary security. Kane's mind raced. They were trapped in the transit tunnel, perhaps halfway to the spaceport. Behind them, the botanical gardens offered no viable escape route. Ahead, what options remained? As if reading his thoughts, Anea pointed to a service ladder mounted on the tunnel wall. Maintenance access. It leads to the surface. We'll be exposed, but it's our only option. Kane nodded. Go. I'll create a diversion. What kind of diversion? Alora asked sharply. Kane gestured to the cargo containers surrounding them. These botanical specimens are valuable exports. Some must be environmentally sensitive, possibly reactive to certain stimuli. He was already scanning the containers, looking for specific hazard markings that might indicate useful properties. Kane, no, Anea pretestiv. It's too dangerous. Come with us. Someone needs to slow them down, or we'll never make it to the ship, Kane insisted. I know what I'm doing. He located a container marked with bioreactive warnings. Perfect. Go now. Head for docking Bay 94. The Stellar Nomad is in the independent contractor section. Access code is 7734 Alpha Tango. For a moment, it seemed Anea might continue to argue, but Alora placed a hand on her arm. He's right. We need time to reach the ship and prepare for launch. Anea hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Be careful, she urged, her eyes conveying far more than her words. Always am, Kane assured her with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. He turned to Leary, still drowsily coming awake as Anea prepared to move. Hey Starshine, I need you to go with Anea and Alora for a little bit. I'll catch up soon, okay? Leary blinked at him, suddenly alert enough to sense something was wrong. Promise you'll come? Wild banthas couldn't keep me away, Kane assured her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead in a gesture that already felt familiar. I'll be right behind you. Leary studied him with those uncannily perceptive violet eyes, then nodded. Solemnly. Okay, but hurry. The monitoring drone says you get extra points for punctuality. Despite the tension of the moment, Kane couldn't suppress a quick smile. I'll keep that in mind. With one last lingering look, Anea carried Leary toward the maintenance ladder, Alora close behind. The monitoring drone seemed momentarily confused about which party to follow. Its programming conflicted between staying with the child subject and the paternal figure. After a moment's hesitation, it split the difference, hovering at the midpoint between them. Once they were safely ascending the ladder, Kane turned his attention to the bioreactive container he'd identified. Working quickly with the precision of an experienced technician, he used tools from his belt to override the container's environmental controls. Let's see how your security forces handle a little botanical chaos, he muttered as he completed the final adjustments. The container's warning lights began to flash, and a mild hissing sound indicated the climate control system was failing exactly as Kane had intended. Whatever was inside would soon react to the change in conditions, hopefully dramatically enough to create the diversion they needed. Kane didn't wait to see the results. He sprinted for the maintenance ladder, scaling it rapidly just as alarms began to sound from the cargo platform below. Through the grating of the access hatch at the top, he could see Anea, Alora, and Leary already moving across the rooftop of what appeared to be a commercial district adjacent to the spaceport. He emerged onto the roof just as the first shouts of confusion echoed from the transit tunnel. Below, some kind of rapidly expanding bioluminescent moss was spilling from the compromised container, its growth accelerated by exposure to the tunnel's atmospheric conditions. Security personnel who had been approaching the cargo platform were now dealing with the spreading biological material, their attention diverted from the fleeing fugitives. That should keep them busy, Kane remarked with satisfaction as he rejoined the group. What did you do? Alora asked, glancing back at the commotion visible through the open maintenance hatch. Introduce some enthusiastic flora to their security protocols, Kane replied. Nothing dangerous, just aggressively friendly. They moved quickly across the rooftops, the spaceport's massive structures now visible in the near distance. The 3 moons of Solaris 9 cast overlapping shadows across their path, creating a disorienting pattern of light and darkness that would hopefully make them more difficult to track from the air. Leary, now fully awake, kept pace admirably, though Kane noticed her antenna drooping with fatigue. Without breaking stride, he swept her up into his arms. She nestled against his chest with complete trust, her small arms wrapping around his neck. I knew you'd be a good dad, she whispered, her breath warm against his ear, even when you didn't know it yet. The simple statement struck Kane with unexpected force. All his life, he'd defined himself by his independence, his freedom from attachment. Yet here, carrying this child through danger, he felt more complete, more purposeful than he ever had during his years of solitary wandering. They reached the edge of the commercial district, the spaceport now directly ahead, separated only by a security perimeter and several exposed loading areas. Kane set Leary down carefully as they crouched behind a ventilation unit to assess their options. Security will be heavier than usual, he observed, noting the increased patrol patterns around the perimeter. They haven't had time to lock down the entire port, but they'll be watching the main entrances. What about service access? Anea suggested. Maintenance crews must have ways in. Kane nodded. There's a waste recycling intake on the far side. Not pleasant, but functional. He had made a point of knowing alternative entry and exit routes at every port he frequented, a habit developed during years of occasionally working in legal gray areas. Once we're inside, Alora asked, how quickly can your ship be prepared for launch? The Nomad stays ready, Kane assured her. Pre-flight checks take 3 minutes, clearance requests another 2, though we might have to skip those formalities given the circumstances. You mean launch without clearance? Anea looked alarmed. Planetary defenses would fire on any unauthorized departure. They have to catch us first, Kane replied with the confidence of someone who had outmaneuvered planetary security more than once. And the Nomad has a few modifications that don't appear in her official registry. Before they could discuss further, the monitoring drone, which had been hovering silently nearby, suddenly emitted a warning tone. Approaching security personnel detected, it announced. Tactical evasion recommended. Kane signaled for silence as the whine of a patrol. Skimmer became audible, growing louder as it approached their position. The craft moved slowly along the rooftop perimeter, its sensors sweeping methodically across the surface. They pressed themselves against the ventilation unit, Kane shielding Leary with his body. The skimmer paused directly adjacent to their hiding place, its engines idling as the operators apparently consulted something on their instruments. Kane held his breath. If the patrol had thermal imaging, their hiding place would offer little concealment. His hand moved instinctively to his tool belt, fingers closing around the sonic calibrator. It wasn't a weapon, but at the right frequency, it could temporarily disorient the skimmer's sensor array. Just as he was about to activate the device, the monitoring drone suddenly detached itself from their group and flew directly toward the patrol skimmer. "What is it doing?" Anea whispered in alarm. The drone approached the security vehicle and began transmitting in an official-sounding voice. IBPA priority override Alpha 79. Paternal assessment in progress. Security sweep interfering with critical observation parameters. Please redirect patrol to alternative sector. The security officers in the skimmer seemed momentarily confused by this unexpected intervention for what appeared to be an authorized Federation drone. There was a brief exchange of communications. Then the skimmer's engines powered up again, and it moved away, continuing its patrol in a different direction. The monitoring drone returned to their position, bobbing in what Kane could have sworn was a self-satisfied manner. "Patrol diverted," it announced. Assessment protocols include provisions for minimizing external interference with observation subjects. "Well," Kane said, genuinely impressed. "Now I'm glad we brought you along after all." "Gratitude noted," the drone replied, adjusting paternal cooperation rating accordingly. They seized the opportunity provided by the drone's unexpected assistance, moving quickly along the edge of the rooftops until they reached the waste recycling intake Kane had mentioned. It was an unassuming access point, a large circular hatch used for transporting organic waste material to the spaceport's recycling facilities. "It's not exactly the main entrance," Kane admitted as he worked to override the access codes, "but it leads directly to the maintenance level, one deck below the docking bays. From there, we can reach the Nomad without crossing any main concourses." The hatch slid open with a reluctant hiss, revealing a sloping transport tube that emitted distinctly unpleasant odors. Leary wrinkled her nose. "It smells like when a habitat digestive systems get backed up," she observed. "Same basic principle," Kane agreed. "Just hold your breath when you can, and we'll be through quickly." One by one, they entered the recycling intake, sliding down the gentle incline into the dimly lit maintenance level of the spaceport. The area was largely automated, staffed only by maintenance droids that paid little attention to the unexpected visitors as they emerged from the transport tube. Kane oriented himself quickly. "Docking Bay 94 is 2 sections north. We'll need to use the service corridors to avoid the main traffic areas." They moved as inconspicuously as possible through the utilitarian passages of the maintenance level, passing occasional workers who barely glanced at them. Unusual personnel were common enough in a busy spaceport, and their disheveled appearance after their journey through the waste system actually helped them blend in as maintenance staff. Finally, they reached a vertical access tube, marked with the numerals 94. "This leads directly up to the docking bay," Kane explained. "Once we're aboard the Nomad, we'll be able to launch within minutes." "And then," Anea asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken between them, now unavoidable as they approached the moment of departure. Kane looked at each of them in turn. Alora, with her regal bearing and scientific brilliance. Anea, whose steady compassion had given Leary a loving home. And finally Leary herself, this impossible miracle who had claimed him as father with such unwavering certainty. In the space of a day, they had become something he'd never thought he wanted or needed, a family. "And then we find a place where Leary can grow up safe," he said, the decision already made somewhere deep within him. "Together." "The outer reaches," Alora suggested. "Beyond Federation space. There are independent colonies where genetic research continues without the restrictive oversight of central authorities. Places where Leary's unique heritage would be viewed with interest rather than fear." "Or the Free Worlds Alliance," Anea countered. "They have established educational systems, cultural diversity. Leary would have opportunities to develop normally, not as a research subject." Kane considered both suggestions. "We have time to decide. The Nomad has enough range to reach either. For now, let's focus on getting off-world." They ascended the access tube and emerged into the docking bay where the stellar Nomad waited. Kane's ship was modest by interstellar standards, a modified light transport with expanded cargo capacity that had been converted to living quarters. Its hull bore the scars and patches of years of service, but Kane maintained its critical systems with meticulous care. "It's perfect," Leary declared, her antenna quivering with excitement despite her fatigue. Kane couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "She's not much to look at, but she's reliable, and apparently has a cloaking system," Elora observed shrewdly, noting certain modifications to the hull that weren't standard on commercial vessels. "Let's call it an enhanced privacy field," Kane corrected with a wink. "Keeps nosy scanners from getting too detailed a look." They approached the ship's entry ramp, which lowered at Kane's approach as the vessel recognized its owner's biosignature. The familiar smell of the Nomad's interior, a mixture of recycled air, machine oil, and the distinctive odor of the specialized cleaning compounds Kane preferred, welcomed him home. Home! The concept had always been abstract for Kane. His ship was functional, a means of transport and occasional shelter, but never truly a home. Yet now, as Leary bounded up the ramp with childish excitement to explore, as Anea and Elora followed, with cautious hope in their expressions, he felt the concept shifting, expanding to include not just a place but people. "Welcome aboard," he said, feeling strangely formal as he gestured them inside. "Let me show you around quickly, then get us airborne before our friends from the GPF figure out where we've gone." The ship's interior was compact but efficiently designed. The main cabin served as both control center and living area, with sleeping compartments accessible through a short corridor. The engine room, where Kane spent most of his time during long journeys, occupied the rear third of the vessel. "It's bigger than it looks from outside," Leary exclaimed, already climbing onto one of the pilot's seats to examine the control panels with fascination. "Dimensional optimization," Kane explained, moving to the navigation console to begin pre-flight checks. "Standard feature on long-range vessels. Makes living in space for extended periods more bearable." The monitoring drone, which had followed them aboard, began a methodical scan of the ship's interior. "Assessing suitability of environment for child development," it announced. "Preliminary evaluation. Adequate but requiring modifications for optimal growth conditions." "We'll work on that," Kane muttered, his fingers flying across the control interfaces as the ship's systems came online. "Anea, Elora, secure yourselves and Leary in the passenger seats. Takeoff might be a bit rough if we need to evade port security." As they settled in, Kane completed the final preparations for launch. The Nomad's engines hummed to life, a sound that had always brought Kane a sense of freedom. Now, strangely, that same sound carried a new association: safety for his newly discovered daughter. "Spaceport Control is hailing us," he reported, noting the flashing communication alert. "They're asking for our flight plan and authorization." "What do we do?" Anea asked tensely. Kane's lips quirked in a half-smile. "We apologize for the technical difficulties with our comm system, of course." He adjusted several settings, creating a deliberate distortion in the outgoing signal. "Spaceport Control, this is the Stellar Nomad requesting immediate departure authorization. Experiencing comm system fluctuations. Please acknowledge." The response came back fragmented, as Kane had ensured it would. "Stellar Nomad, your departure is not." Repeat, "Not authorized. Maintain position and prepare for security inspection." "Oh dear, we seem to be having trouble receiving your transmission," Kane replied innocently, proceeding with standard departure protocol. "Thank you for your assistance." He disengaged the docking clamps and activated the ship's maneuvering thrusters, guiding the Nomad smoothly out of the bay and into the open air above the spaceport. The vessel trembled slightly as it transitioned from dock stability to free flight. "They're dispatching security vessels," Elora warned, watching the scanner display. "Expected," Kane acknowledged calmly. "Everyone hold tight." He engaged the main drives, and the Nomads surged upward with acceleration that pressed them all back into their seats. Leary squealed with delight at the sensation, while Anea gripped her restraints with white knuckles. "Activating countermeasures," Kane announced as warning signals indicated pursuit craft launching from the spaceport. His fingers danced across the control panel, activating systems that were definitely not included in the ship's official registry. The enhanced privacy field Allura had noted shimmed into existence around the Nomad, distorting its sensor profile and making it difficult for pursuers to maintain a lock. Simultaneously, a series of small decoy drones deployed from hidden compartments, each broadcasting a copy of the Nomad's signature in different directions. "Clever," Allura commented, professional appreciation evident in her voice. "Your ship has more surprises than its appearance suggests." "A necessary feature in my line of work," Kane replied, concentrating on their ascent trajectory. The purple atmosphere of Solaris 9 was already thinning around them, the blackness of space becoming visible overhead. The pursuit craft fell for the decoy strategy, splitting their forces to chase multiple phantom signatures while the actual Nomad continued its climb toward the stars. By the time they realized their error, Kane's ship had already reached the orbital threshold where planetary security jurisdiction ended. "We're clear," Kane announced as they broke free of Solaris 9's gravity well, setting course for the nearest jump point. Leary unbuckled her restraints despite Aenea's protests and moved to stand beside Kane at the control console. "Can I watch you plot the course?" she asked eagerly. "Absolutely," Kane agreed, making room for her beside him. "This is a good opportunity for your first navigation lesson." As he guided the ship away from Solaris 9, explaining the basics of interstellar navigation to his attentive daughter, Kane felt an unfamiliar sense of rightness settle over him. For years, he had valued his freedom above all else, avoiding attachments and responsibilities that might limit his movements among the stars. Now, paradoxically, he felt more free than ever before. Not despite the new connections he had formed in the past 24 hours, but because of them. There was liberation in commitment. He was discovering a different kind of freedom found not in the absence of bonds, but in their embrace. The monitoring drone, still diligently recording, hovered nearby. "Final paternal assessment complete," it announced. Conclusion: Kane Harrow demonstrates exceptional paternal capability despite absence of prior experience or preparation. Recommended status: full parental recognition with expedited formal certification. "Does that mean you're officially my dad now?" Leary asked, looking up at Kane with those violet eyes that somehow mirrored his own in expression, if not in color. Kane placed a gentle hand on her head, feeling the soft vibration of her antenna against his palm. "I think I always was," he said softly. "I just didn't know it until you found me." Aenea and Allura exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them. A shared recognition, perhaps, that whatever challenges lay ahead, they had already formed the beginnings of an unconventional but genuinely committed family unit. As the stellar Nomad accelerated toward the jump point that would take them beyond Federation space, Kane felt no regret for the solitary life he was leaving behind. Instead, he felt a growing anticipation for the future they would build together. A future where a human technician, 2 Solaran women, and 1 extraordinary little girl with pointed ears and violet eyes would create their own definition of family. The stars stretched before them, infinite possibilities in their gleaming depths. But for once in his life, Kane Harrow wasn't seeking escape among them. He was seeking home, and had already found it in the unlikely collection of beings that had claimed his heart as surely as Leary had claimed him as father. "Where to next, Dad?" Leary asked, her finger hovering over the star chart displayed on the navigation console. Kane looked at Aenea and Allura, then back to his daughter. "Somewhere we can be together," he answered. "That's all that matters now." The monitoring drone bobbed in apparent satisfaction. Assessment complete, it declared one final time. Family unit confirmed. And as the stellar Nomad leaped into the swirling dimension of hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo of newfound family toward whatever adventures awaited, Kane Harrow, once the most committed loner in known space, found himself exactly where he was meant to be. All because a little alien girl had seen him and shouted, "Mom, look, my dad is here."